Hey, it's Pastor Aaron, and I am in the woods here in Painesville and Beatty Landing, and it is literally freezing cold. And so it's on this freezing cold morning that I want to say good morning to you and happy Mother's Day. And Mother Nature, if I can say so, is not cooperating because it's snowing outside. It is literally snowing, and I'm freezing cold. And so I hope that I can do this sermon in just a few takes so I can get out of here and go home and enjoy the rest of the day in the warmth, probably by the fire, because it is cold. Today on this Mother's Day, we finish up a series on the prophet Elijah, and it's been one of my favorite series. We've talked about the provisions of God and how God can work even in the most incredible circumstances to provide for us, and to see that He's giving us provision as we live out the purpose He set aside for us. And if we're looking at the story of Elijah, we're looking at some incredible highlights. I mean, the guy just called down fire on Mount Carmel. He stood up to his enemies. And just a couple verses later, we see him go to this mountain, the same mountain that Moses spoke to God. And there Elijah also sees and feels the very presence of God in the most incredible, powerful way. So Elijah's had this incredible life, and not to mention that in 2 Kings chapter 2, it says that Elijah didn't die. He ascended into heaven on a chariot of fire. So we're talking about this man in Elijah who's lived this incredible life, a highlight reel sort of life that we love to read about even to this day. So let me just review really quickly these highlights in the life of Elijah. He stands up to a king. He stops the rain. He's supernaturally protected and provided for by God. He brings a dead child back to life. He stands up to the king and 450 prophets, and he calls down fire from heaven, which causes thousands of people to turn back to God. And then he sees God on the face of a mountain, then eventually ascends into heaven on a chariot of fire. Now, Christians like to use the word mountaintop to describe these incredible experiences, or they experience great faith or great encounters with God. And Elijah seems to go from mountaintop to mountaintop to mountaintop. It's all highlights. And we can imagine if we were seeing Elijah's life, his highlight reel played out on Facebook or Instagram, we'd see a picture of Elijah. We'd see a picture of Elijah, this beautiful image of a desert sunset with the hashtag God's got me. And then we'd see an image of Elijah sitting with that boy risen from the dead and say hashtag raised to life. And we'd see an image of Elijah on this mountaintop next to that fire, and you'd see people worshiping, and it would say hashtag revival fire. And we'd see an image of a mountain face, and it'd say hashtag presence of God. We'd see a selfie of Elijah with Israel behind him in the distance with the hashtag going home. And if we can judge the life of Elijah by these 5 images, we'd say, what an incredible life, what a charmed life, what a perfect life for a prophet. And if I'm an aspiring prophet, if I'm an aspiring Elijah, an aspiring pastor, an aspiring preacher, an aspiring man of God, I might say, how can I live up to that standard? How can I possibly do all of those incredible things? The truth is, I can't. But really, this is something we can all sort of identify with. Measuring our standard of life, measuring our value, measuring our worth, measuring our success by some perceived standard that we might have of ourselves, or some perceived standard that we've learned from culture, or some perceived standard that we get from our mother-in-law or sister or Facebook friends or people in our business. We all have this struggle, and especially moms. Now, guys, I know you struggle with some stuff too, but I want you to take a seat and calm down, because your struggle is like your lawn and making sure that your grill is just as nice as your neighbor's, making sure your TV is just as big as your buddies, or that your sports team is winning enough games. So just calm down, because what the ladies are going through, what the moms are going through is far, far more intense. The ladies are dealing with the burden placed on them by culture and society, or by their own standard. And the standard, it measures success, or the success of your children, or the success of your family, of your household, based on whether or not their kids or their husband are well fed, or swear or don't swear, or smile in all of their pictures, or wear matching outfits, or graduate with honors, or marry pretty girls or handsome guys, or go to good schools, or have successful careers, and all sorts of ridiculous little tests that you feel like you need to pass to appease your neighbors, or the other ladies at church, or your mother-in-law, or even just your own standard of success, or what nurturing or being a good mother looks like. And what if you work? Or what if you go to school? Or what if you manage your own small business? You get all these pressures, all these burdens, all the weight of all these things compounded on each other as you deal with other people's expectations and your own expectations of what success and thriving and satisfaction and happiness should look like. It's expectation after expectation after expectation, all of which, well, even a few of which are impossible to do well. And yet, when people ask you how you're doing, when people ask you on an update on your lives, what do you share? You share the mountaintops. Just like we might see in the story of Elijah if we viewed it in a snapshot. We talk about the triumphs and the successes and the things that we are proud of, because we wouldn't dare share the things that are wrong with us, because we know that we're being assessed by other people, judged by other people, and sometimes even speaking the problems out loud make us feel like a failure even to our own set of standards. If we went to a high school reunion, we'd never say, in response to the famous question, "How are you?" We would never say, "Well, I'm 3 months behind on my bills." We would never say, "I'm depressed. I haven't left my couch in 3 days, and I've given my kids pizza rolls for 6 straight meals." We'd never say, "I don't want to talk to my teenage son, and I haven't talked to him in 3 days because he's too lazy to do his homework. It's driving me crazy and causing me all sorts of stress." We'd never say things like, "I haven't slept in the same room as my husband in 6 months because he's driving me crazy, and he's annoying, and he's selfish." We never say things like that because it never feels safe. And even if it does feel safe, even if we do have that one friend, we've all been burned before. We've all been betrayed. People have always talked about us. We never quite feel like it's okay to share our burdens and the thing that's really wrong with us, or the things that we're really encountering, because we know we're being assessed by everyone around us, and in fact assessed by our own personal standard all the time. So you stick to the highlights. You only talk about the mountaintops, and after all, that's what normal is, right? I mean, look at Facebook, look at Instagram. That's what normal is. It's all about the mountaintops. Having a clean house, having good kids, looking pretty, having a happy life, that is normal. But here's the thing. We all know that that's not normal. Dysfunction is normal. Brokenness is normal. Feeling burnt out and tired is normal. And in spite of what we see in the highlight reel life of Elijah, Elijah knew it too. Elijah knew that the highlights weren't the norm. So today, as we wrap up this series, I want to speak to everyone who struggles with this sense of value by comparison, or this struggle to always be okay or perfect or put together, or the standard that we set for ourselves to always be perfect and put together and make sure everything is right. Maybe not for other people, but just so that we can feel okay and like we're doing okay for our kids, and okay for our husbands, and okay for the standard that I've placed on myself. And this message is for everyone, but specifically, I think it's for you ladies, because you deal with a whole lot of stress and concern and pressure and weight and burdens that us guys just never have to deal with because we're not built that way, we're not wired that way. So ladies, this one's for you. Moms, this one's for you because it's your day. Guys, I want you to stick around, because as you hear this, it will apply to you, but it will also help you to honor those moms and those ladies in a better way. So let's start reading our passage together. Elijah was afraid and ran for his life when he came to Beersheba in Judah. He left his servant there, while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. He came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. "I've had enough, Lord," he said. "Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors." Then he lay down under the bush and fell asleep. Okay, if we're looking at Elijah's life through that lens of the highlight, he just comes down from Mount Carmel. He has this incredible victory over Ahab, who's a total jerk, and all his prophets, and the people turn back to God. And again, this is just a couple verses before Elijah is on that same mountain where God spoke to Moses. Elijah himself is about to experience the full presence of God. And yet here he is in this spot where he wants to die. Like, he's run away, he's scared, he's freaked out, he's full of anxiety and fear and depression, and he doesn't want to live anymore. So the question I have is, how the heck did we get to this spot? So here's the background. King Ahab, well, his wife's name is Jezebel, and she sends Elijah this message because she loves to worship Baal. She loves these false gods. And she says to Elijah, I'm going to kill you. And so this is why he runs for his life. This is why he hides in the desert. This is why he's sheltering himself under a tree and wants to die. Now, what sticks out to me is that Elijah is having this existential crisis, this moment of complete and crippling depression and loneliness and fear and anxiety, because this woman threatens his life. And sure, no one wants their life threatened, but Elijah should know that God is going to provide for him. God has provided for Elijah for 3.5 years. Remember, he's fed him with ravens, and he's brought dead people back to life, and he calls down fire from the mountaintop, and God provides. So Elijah should know that God is not going to let this happen to him. But her words crush him emotionally and crush him psychologically, and he feels totally defeated in spite of the incredible things that he's seen God do. And he's just seen and experienced all these amazing things, all these wondrous things, and yet he feels depressed and alone. Depressed and alone. And man, if I can't identify with this, and I think so many of us can. I mean, just as a pastor, I've had moments of complete joy and exuberation and baptisms and services where all sorts of people show up, and mission trips and service projects and events where thousands of people show up, and the next day I couldn't get off the couch. I felt beat up. I felt worn down. I felt like even though something amazing happened, I didn't quite do it good enough, right? I think we've all been in that spot. And moms, how many times have you celebrated a highlight moment, a mountaintop moment, only the next day or the next week to feel like a total failure? You've suffered through depression or anxiety, or you just felt like things weren't right, and the reason you felt like that was nowhere near as significant or important than the thing that you just received joy from, and yet here you are feeling this way. And if you look back, you can probably understand that some of the things that stressed you out and freaked you out and made you feel depressed weren't even that significant. And what's interesting is when we read what Elijah complains to God about, and we don't read this today, we read this later on in the chapter, but none of the things he complains to God about are true or legitimate. They're so small in comparison to all the great things that had just happened to him. But Elijah let his fatigue and his frustration and his loneliness and his personal feelings of success determine his value. He let his emotions and his physical weariness supersede what he knew intellectually and what he knew experientially about the provisions and presence of God. And this is why he's sitting here in the desert, 15 miles away from the population and his loyal servant, sitting under this tree that only gives a little bit of shade, wanting to die. Saying he's a failure, and no better than all the other failures in the past. His failure father, his failure mother, having the same baggage that he grew up in, all these things that we can identify with. There's Elijah saying the same things. Now I want you to realize, I want you to observe what God does with Elijah in this space, right? Because Elijah's feeling totally hopeless, and you're like, okay, what's God gonna do, right? Well, watch what he does. All at once an angel touched him and said, get up and eat. He looked around, and there by his head was some bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate and drank and then lay down again. So God sends a messenger, an angel, to provide provisions for Elijah. He gives him some warm bread and some water, and the angel says, look, I need you to eat. And this is, for Elijah, really a step up from the birds feeding him, right? There's a little personal touch. And Elijah does what we so often do when we're feeling depressed. He crushes some carbs and he takes a long nap. Then it says the angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you. So he got up and ate and drank. Strengthened by that food, he traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. There he went into a cave and spent the day. So Elijah eats again, and the angel reminds Elijah that his journey isn't done yet. And so he has him eat a little bit more. The angel says, look, you got to eat, you got to relax, because your journey isn't done yet. and your journey cannot be done by yourself. He says the journey's too much for you, so you have to eat. And quite simply, the angel is saying to Elijah, you have to go travel for 40 days, so you need to eat some food or you're not going to make it. Now, this isn't the main point of the message, but I want to point out the mercy of God in Elijah's weakness. The mercy of God in Elijah's weakness and his continued provision for Elijah. Now, I think it's perfectly reasonable for us to think that God might be a little bit irritated with Elijah at this point. I mean, God's gonna be thinking like, dude, what's your problem? Like, I've provided for you in so many different ways. I've done so many things for you. Elijah, I'm showing myself to you in ways and in miracles that I will not show to thousands of other prophets. And if we read the Bible, we see that Elijah experienced more of God than many, 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 many other people throughout the Bible. So God could have been frustrated with Elijah, but instead of being frustrated, instead of scolding him, here's what he does. He provides for him. But notice something else. Notice that this is the first time in this story God isn't communicating with Elijah directly. He sends an angel on his behalf. And the message is, okay, eat, relax, rest, and eat some more, because the journey is too much for you. The journey is too much for you. And we already know this has a physical meaning. Elijah's got to go on this long journey. But really, it means a lot more than that. What the angel is saying to Elijah is that this journey is too much for you to do alone. This journey is too much for you to do alone. The journey is too much for you to do by yourself. And so God's going to send you the aid of others, your family, your friends, the messengers God puts in your path to help you along the way. And more importantly, and I want you to hear the freedom in this, the journey is too much for you to do without the daily presence of God in your life, walking ahead of you and sometimes lifting you up and carrying you in your struggle. You cannot do it. And that is such a countercultural idea where we're told that we can do anything and we don't need anyone, let alone God. But can we? Like, have you tried to do everything on your own? How's that going for you? How's that working out for you? The reality is, we can't do it on our own, and all of us know this. We've experienced this. If you're older than like 10 years old, like, you know you can't do things on your own. It's the storyline of our lives. There's all sorts of evidence to prove it, that we cannot possibly do all of the things that we think we can on our own. And when we insist on trying, we are trying to stand in the place of God. And this is why we end up crashed out in the desert, hiding under a tree, feeling broken and discouraged, because we've said, God, I believe in you, but more than that, I believe in me and my ability to succeed and make a great impression on people, or meet my own impossible standard and be tough and be brave and be strong. But the thing is, we've tried all that and it just doesn't work. But what God is trying to say to us, and this seems so impossibly difficult for us because it's so against our own human nature, is that freedom and joy and the releasing of burdens and the restriction of the bondage we place on our own self is to embrace the reality that we can't do it on our own. And say, God, the journey is too much for me. God, I need your help because I'm imperfect. God, I need you because I'm a broken person who is healed by your grace. God, I'm going to continue to make mistakes, and my kids are going to be imperfect, and my husband is going to be imperfect, and sometimes the laundry won't get done, and the house will be messy, and sometimes I'll fail, and sometimes the clothes won't match, and faces will be dirty, or sometimes I'll have bad months with my business, or I'll make mistakes at work. And it's okay, because it's in this disorder when your perfect love shines through the brightest. It's in my weaknesses that your strength is revealed. And in relying on you to grow me and strengthen me in my weakness, I'm giving my kids permission to be weak and not have to be perfect. And through that experience of your love and grace, I'm giving my coworkers and my clients not an example of obtainable perfection, not in keeping personal standards so high that there's no room for failure, but an example of your unrelenting mercy and love for an imperfect person. So here's my encouragement for you. The journey is too much for you. The journey is too much for me. The journey is too much for all of us. And this passage is a reminder that what's ahead of us, the purpose assigned to us, it can't be done just by us. It requires community. It requires the people around us. It requires the encouragement and the forgiveness and the love and the mercy of friends. But most importantly, it requires God. Total dependence on Him to pick us up and carry us when we are at our weakest, and a chain-breaking understanding that He loves us in our weakness and is magnified in our weakness. So this is something that we can say out loud. Say it out loud with me. God loves me at my weakest. God loves me at my weakest. God is magnified and is more glorious, and His grace shines the brightest in my weakness. Does this make you want to breathe a sigh of relief? I know it does for me. It makes me want to just relax and say, God is big enough for my burdens. I don't have to carry them on my own. And it's in my imperfection that His grace shines the brightest. I love this. I love this truth. It puts my heart at ease, and it makes me ready for the journey ahead. A journey that I'm not doing alone, because I can't do it alone. Okay, so here's the challenge. And ladies, this one's for you. Let it go. Let the burden go. You are perfectly imperfect because the Creator of the universe has called you daughter. So you don't have to live a highlight reel Instagram life. You can feed your kids cereal and ice cream for dinner every night this month, and it won't change your value. It won't impact your calling. It may cost you on your dental bill, and it's not really good for them. So like you're gonna have to make it up with this month of nothing but vegetables and probably spinach and like beans and like lentils and oats and stuff. But give yourself a break. Look, you can lose your business. You can make a mistake with one of your patients. You can forget to pay the mortgage. You can file for bankruptcy, and it has zero impact on the reality that God has adopted you as His, calls you a friend, and makes His dwelling inside of your heart. And so you can face these trials not alone, but with someone who's creating a path ahead of you, carrying you on this journey so you can have your moment. You can fail. You can be a disappointment to someone because you know that in this weakness, in this hard part of your journey, you have the opportunity to teach and model and become a source of Jesus' love and grace for those people around you. You get to model His love and forgiveness and His perfect grace in your imperfect life. And guess what? That is okay because God gets the glory. He is elevated, and other people see it in you and want to know Jesus because of you and because of your difficult path. So on this Mother's Day, instead of sharing an Instagram picture of your highlight reel life, show a picture of your sink full of dishes, or your scrubs balled up in the corner, or your laundry basket undone, or your stock room that's all disheveled, or the dirt on your child's face, because this is life. This is life, and it's real, and it's where God does His best work. Not only in the success of the mountaintops, but in the grace of the in-between. The journey is too much for you, but it's your brokenness that points to the glory of the one who's creating the path and leading us through it. Thanks for all you do, moms. Release yourself from that burden. Be encouraged by His love. Rest in His provisions. Eat some chocolate and bask in the light of the Savior who calls you daughter, no matter the circumstances.